Ela as quebras erradas, ela não conseguiu assimilar. Tudo jóia? Muito obrigado pela presença de todos. Queria, antes de qualquer coisa, dizer que o nosso convidado está no trânsito, chegando daqui 5 minutos. O que é oportuno, porque antes de começar o papo, e nós convidamos o Felipe Vilicic, editor da Veja, para conduzir a conversa com o David, eu gostaria de chamar aqui a Manuela Pérez, que é representante da The School of Life, que é quem de fato fez tudo isso acontecer. Esse é um primeiro encontro que a gente está fazendo aqui, espero que de vários outros. É o começo de uma parceria que a gente está fazendo com a The School of Life. E a ideia da Manuela vir aqui também é explicar um pouco o que é o The School of Life, como é que eles estão organizados aqui em São Paulo. Então, na verdade, começando as operações aqui. Então, por favor, Manuela, vem aqui e explica pra gente como é que é.
Obrigada, gente. Obrigada por me receber hoje aqui. Eu não sei o quanto vocês estão familiarizados com a escola, por isso que eu até pedi para fazer uma abertura contando de como que a gente começou. A escola, ela busca desenvolver inteligência emocional a partir da cultura. E essa intenção, ela saiu da lacuna que a gente percebeu entre o mundo acadêmico, que é super técnico e aprofundado, mas às vezes ele é um pouco distante das questões do dia a dia. E ao mesmo tempo você tem a autoajuda, que ela acaba sendo um pouco mais superficial e que ela consola todos nos temas da vida, e ela é muito popular nisso, mas por outro lado ela deixa de lado às vezes uma questão mais de pesquisa e de aprofundamento. A escola então, ela olha essas questões, eu não sei se chegaram a ver no site as aulas, que são como encontrar o trabalho da sua vida, como ter melhores conversas, como equilibrar o trabalho e vida pessoal, como lidar com a morte, por exemplo, que são questões que a gente passa em diferentes momentos da vida, e em alguns momentos você está mais conectado com algum tema, em outros, mas a questão é que a gente olha para esses temas olhando o que foi desenvolvido na filosofia, na literatura, na arte, na psicologia nos últimos 2000 anos. Então a ideia é de fato olhar para essas questões, mas dando para elas outras perspectivas, outros olhares, e não dando respostas. A ideia da escola é justamente fazer com que as pessoas elas desenvolvam melhores perguntas e com isso assim elas consigam olhar no entorno e ver respostas que talvez elas não tivessem enxergado. E essa metodologia foi muito interessante, porque além de trabalhar essa questão dos temas, a gente tem um outro olhar sobre a cidade. A ideia é de você sair de um espaço de sala de aula. Então você tem aulas num espaço de sala de aula, mas você tem aulas que você justamente questiona esse espaço. Uma aula de análise do comportamento humano no zoológico. Então como que os animais se relacionam? Quem que é o líder na selva? E como que você pode trazer isso para o seu cotidiano? Ou uma aula de desenho para pessoas que não desenham. Que justamente como que você para e você trava a sua criatividade quando você tem 3, 5 anos, de repente o sol tem que ter 8 raios, a casa ela tem que ter porta e janela, e você permite as pessoas a redesenharem, a olharem de novo a criatividade. E essa abordagem que a escola teve, ela teve um sucesso muito grande. Então ela foi primeiro fundada em 2008 pelo Alain de Botton, um filósofo e escritor, e aí a repercussão foi muito interessante, porque a gente percebeu que a demanda por temas da vida e por um espaço de discussão deles não era só de Londres. E ela acabou tendo uma repercussão internacional. Então abriu-se desde 2013 em Amsterdã, Paris, Belgrado, Melbourne, e ela chegou em Brasil em 2013 também. E a operação ela ficou um pouco segmentada: Rio de Janeiro, Porto Alegre e São Paulo. E a gente começa de fato com uma grade regular a partir do ano passado. Queria até convidar vocês um dia para vir conhecer as nossas atividades. Bom, o David, que está vindo em breve, que está preso no trânsito, ele é o professor-chefe da escola, ele é o coordenador de educação internacional da escola, ele participa do desenvolvimento da metodologia, do treinamento dos professores, ele tem uma relação muito próxima com a gente, além de ter sido fundador da revista Wired, jornalista em diferentes veículos. Então ele acaba abordando temas desde empreendedorismo, temas de equilíbrio de vida e trabalho, confiança. Ele é um um profissional múltiplo. Obrigada. Bom, atualmente a gente ainda não tem uma sede física, a gente vai abrir em breve, ainda esse ano, mas a gente faz atividades no Rio de Janeiro, na Casa Ipanema, e em São Paulo, em 2 lugares. Um chama Casa Samambaia, fica na Vila Madalena, e outro Casa Anel 10. Eu acho que agora... Tchan, 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 tchan.
Precisamos ganhar um pouquinho de tempo, porque o palestrante está chegando aqui na porta. Alguém tem alguma pergunta?
Fala do canal do YouTube de vocês, que é legal.
Então, é interessante que assim, o Alan ele foi desenvolvendo vários projetos super vinculados à The School of Life. Um é o canal de YouTube que tem programas de filosofia e uma maneira, uma abordagem mais divertida para olhar sobre esses temas. E também o The Book of Life. São todos gratuitos e trabalham temas que são abordados na escola, mas com referências muito contemporâneas dessas temáticas.
Aqui no Brasil os professores são todos brasileiros?
Não. A coordenação de educação no Brasil, quem dá é o Stephen Little, que ele é um físico budista, ele é um dos pioneiros de mindfulness. Então ele fez um treinamento em Londres, ficou um mês lá e acabou assumindo a coordenação de educação aqui no Brasil. E aí os professores é muito interessante, porque eles são de diferentes áreas. Você tem o James Allen, que é um ambientalista, ele trabalhou com empoderamento de mulheres no Sudão, com cegos na França, com trabalhos sustentáveis na África. E também dá, a ideia é que os professores, eles trabalham em diferentes meios. Então você tem a Carla Pernambuco, que é chefe, já teve a Lourdes Hernandes, que também é uma chefe, o Paulo Van Poser, artista. Então a ideia é quem que está preparado para falar sobre a vida. O que a gente identifica são pessoas que desenvolvem trabalhos interessantes nas áreas delas e que conduzem as pessoas nessas questões. Você tira a posição do professor como detentor do conhecimento. Você coloca o conhecimento... Primeiro você olha para a questão e você, como eu falei, você olha o que já foi desenvolvido em diferentes áreas nessas questões, e o professor ele faz parte desse processo de discussão. É engraçado que às vezes até os professores se preparando, eles também vêm com novos insights. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Good morning. Seja bem-vindo. Chegou muito bom. Nós estamos esperando por você. Deixa eu só te apresentar. Vai ser o seu entrevistador. Vocês podem sentar aqui, já podem começar na sequência. Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado.
Yeah. So this is good.
English, yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you.
Ok. Então, já apresentaram o David para vocês e um pouco do que ele já fez, que ele fundou a Award UK, que por muito tempo foi, a meu ver, a melhor award do mundo, do que americana de qualidade e tal. E a gente vai falar em inglês, por respeito ao palestrante aqui, mas se tiver alguma dúvida de algo que ele tenha falado, eu posso traduzir depois, a gente abrir para perguntas. So, David, the School of Life tries to teach us how to live. But for some people it's a little bit strange, because after all, is living not something that we could learn by ourselves? Why is such school so important and could help us with some aspects of it?
Your question is absolutely perfect. You should be here, I think. First of all, can I say apologies for being late today. There was a confusion at Santos Dumont, and you know what aeroplanes are like, so apologies. And I'm also very aware that I appear to have one shirt, which is true. So it's very nice to be here. But back to the question. The School of Life doesn't teach people how to live, I hope. I don't think, seriously, I don't think anyone can tell someone else how to live. Many of us try. We often try to help other people change their lives in particular ways, especially the people we love or the people who are friends of ours. But you know what? We are the only people living our lives. And I think we're the only people who really know how we should live our lives. So I think what the school tries to do is to encourage that sense of autonomy. If you think about living in the modern world, there are, if you like, two separate forces, or two separate collections of forces which are influencing our behavior and our thinking. One comes from outside. We call it the cultural consciousness, or the culture or the society we live in. And one comes from inside, and we probably call this our values, or our intentions, or our dreams, or our decisions, if you like. And sometimes those things fit together, and sometimes they clash. And I suspect that many people resort to following the outside influences more than the inside influences, because this is where fashion comes in, or in fact our business, the business of media, is involved in this outside cultural set of influences. And in a sense, I think the School of Life tries to push a little bit against that and say, how can you look inside yourself and say, what is the kind of life I want to be living? And how close am I to that kind of life? And could I get a little bit closer? I think that's what we do. So I hope we don't tell people how to live their lives, but I think we do help people discover more about the lives they would like to live.
In the School of Life, you teach two very interesting classes. The names are How to Find a Job You Love and How to Balance Work with Life. So, what are your tips to find a ideal job and also to balance this incredible job with your personal life and family?
Okay, so yeah, we have two classes. One is called How to Find a Job You Love, as you say, and the other is How to Balance Work with Life. And to be honest, these are both obsessions of mine, because I like my work, but I don't really like work. I think that was everybody, and yet, I've been, as you can see, I've been working a long time in my life, and actually in my personal life, I made a decision a long time ago to try to work less, and I realized that if I worked less, I would earn less money, I would have less money, and therefore I would need to spend less money. And so I made a kind of triangle, if you like, of working less, earning less, and spending less. It was an experiment I did in my own life. And for me, the results were very joyful. I mean, I suddenly discovered that I had a lot more time in the week than I had before. I had less money, but I had more time. And the time was worth more than the money, if you see what I mean. So this was just a personal take. I'm not saying everyone should do this. I decided, a long time ago, in 1989, actually, to make this decision. And as a result, this year I've turned 50 years old, and out of all the people I know, who are my friends and my colleagues and my family, I'm probably the poorest, but the most happy. and I think they would say that too. So sometimes when I need a bit of money, maybe I go and see them, and sometimes when I need they need a bit of happiness, they come and see me. So it's a trade. But I don't have a car. I live in a small apartment in London, and when I go on holiday, I have my mochila, I have my backpack, and I don't go to a big resort. And so these are the sacrifices I made. But for me, this has been the right thing to do. So I've always been interested in the world of work. The very first, when I became a freelancer, when I became self-employed, the very first editorial job I had was I was the editor of a magazine for a management consultancy about exactly this subject. It was in 1989. And it was incredibly revolutionary, this idea that actually you could work better, or you could work in a cooler way or a smarter way, if you like. Then in the 1980s, and some people here might even remember that time, it was that film Wall Street. You know, it was the yuppie. Everything was very driven. The point was, especially if you were a man, you worked until 11 o'clock at night, midnight. You went to the office at 7 in the morning, at 8 in the morning. The company gave you a Ferrari or a Porsche. You know, this was the culture of, including us, you know, including journalism. And I mean, incredible to imagine now that a magazine would give you a Porsche, but in a way, you know, that's kind of what it was like. And in a way, there was a trade-off. You give your whole life to the company, and the company gives you a Porsche, or status, or both, or lots of money, or something. And you know what? I like the idea of the Porsche. I never got a Porsche, but actually, I saw something very important happen to me. As someone more senior to me, when I was last working in a company back in the 80s, he had a nervous breakdown. You understand this? A psychiatric breakdown because he was working too hard. And suddenly I thought, you know what? Nothing is worth that. And sadly, I think now in the world of work, people are starting to have psychiatric or nervous breakdowns again. Because again, now, especially in Europe, we are starting to work very hard again, by which I mean long hours. Especially yesterday, I was speaking to some people about entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurs now in Britain and in Europe and in the United States, these startup people tend to like to work, you know, all night, all day, all weekend. And I don't think it's healthy. I don't think they need to either. But it's the culture has come around again to this long working. So, sorry, to come back to your questions. This idea of how to get a job you love and how to balance work with life, you can see how it's important for me personally. It's been something that I've tried to strive for in my own life. And the idea of getting a job you love is a very interesting one, because not everyone would want that. Some people want a job that they can forget. You know, they get the money, they go home, they get the money, and the more important part of their life is the non-work life, and that's great, good for them. But other people want a world of work that they actually feel connected with in an emotional way, and we use this word love importantly, because really we want to say probably there's a job that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, you will be excited to do. You, on a Monday morning, you will get out of your bed with excitement to go to that job. And it's probably there, out there in the world. But the class proposes something quite revolutionary, I think. It says the way to find this job is not to find the job in a traditional way. It's not to say, to look at all the advertisements for jobs that are on the web or in magazines or on LinkedIn or whatever, and find a job that is kind of okay, and then change yourself a little bit to fit into that job, which is what we all do, if you like. We find a job, it's about 70% fine, and the 30% of us, we compromise, if you like. I suspect that way of finding work will be disappearing anyway soon. The world of work is changing. But the class suggests that maybe there's the other way around. Maybe we look more and more inside ourselves, and we do work in the class to explore this, about who am I? What kind of am I when I'm at work, if you like? What kind of work really suits me best? And then we go out and find the job that has to fit us. If you see what I mean, it's reversing the process, and we have a very good exercise in the class which explores this in some depth. And obviously, that process will take longer. But actually, in the end, I think we'll end up with some work that we will really take delight in. And you know what? Work you take delight in is work that's not really work. And what a gift. What a gift to have.
Is it more difficult to balance your life and your work today with emails, websites, on all this information on the web? Do you think that it is more difficult, and do you need to stay away from that?
Well, I'm famous for being a techno-skeptic, and I've had the privilege here for Info to write a piece about disconnecting from the internet, which I did for a long time, for 21 days. And even though I was part of the team that began Wired in the United Kingdom, I'm quite techno-skeptic. I'm quite skeptical about the benefits of technology. I think there are many benefits, but I think we're kind of excited. We're like a child in the first, like an adolescent, really, actually, in the first spurt of independence with the internet, and we're overwhelmed by how amazing it is. And I include, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and these people. That we're so excited by it. I will answer your question, but we're so excited by it that actually we kind of think the internet, especially digital life and technology, will solve all problems. And that's the state we've got to in the world at the moment. Zuckerberg is talking about taking over the federal government of the United States. I mean, he really believes that social media or whatever, or connectivity or something, big data, will solve political problems. I want to see him go to Nigeria and Boko Haram and see how that works, But to come back to your question, I think we in our lives, we bring this on ourselves. We tend to live with the digital world 24 hours a day. And we usually do it through our phones. I mean, I'm pleased to say my phone is out there in my bag. And I try to do that as much as possible. And I especially try not to have my phone in my bedroom. Because this is a time, I'm as good or bad as everyone. The phone's there and, I wonder if anybody has WhatsApped me, or I wonder if there's a message from so-and-so or an email replied to. Because it's a toy and it's exciting when someone sends you a message. But actually what happens is we start living with this thing as a kind of second head, if you like. And it's like a second head that doesn't stop talking. Because the internet, it never stops talking. It's always sending this information. And as a result, I think we fall into two traps. One is we imagine that we always have to be connected. It's a status thing. Remember, if you look at those YouTube films of the very first days of mobile phones, of cellular phones, it was a status thing. I'm so important, I need to be connected all the time. So I carry this huge telephone with me, and and look at me. We're doing the same with our smartphones. We're at the bus stop, and I can't even wait 4 minutes for this bus without being connected to central control or whoever it is. And actually, we don't need to be connected all the time. We invented this idea of always on with broadband. Before, people here might remember before broadband. There was this modem, you dialed a number and it went, there's this noise, and then an unbelievably slow internet connection delivered to you some emails, and you sent some, and then you disconnected the phone. We in those days we had the internet connect, disconnect, connect, disconnect. Then we invented broadband, and suddenly miracle, we're connected all the time. And now we think we have to be connected all the time. You know what? And I think we don't. So I often break this rule, but usually I try and check my emails twice a day. And generally that works. Today, because we've had a bit of confusion at Santos Dumont, I've been back and forth, and that's fine. You can make an exception to your rule. But usually when I'm working in London, I try and look in the morning at about 11 o'clock, and in the afternoon at about 4 o'clock, and that's kind of enough. I'm not on Facebook or Twitter. I tried Facebook, and I didn't really like it very much. And so I stopped. But I do have connect. I like WhatsApp. I like SMS. I like this connectivity. And I like my iPhone. But the second thing that I think this world gives us is the iPhone gives us. Smartphones they give us answers very, very quickly. If I suddenly said here, what is the population of Uzbekistan? We will have this answer within, probably someone's looking already, we'll have this answer within, 30 seconds. This is incredible. Before smartphones, that would have taken, at least a book or a phone call or a library or something, But the question is, as a result, because the internet gives us instant answers to things, I think we've come to expect instant answers from ourselves as well. So in our relations with people, in in our work. You know, the boss says, "What is the population of Uzbekistan?" And suddenly, oh my goodness, you know, where's Google? You know, and whereas actually there are some questions. What is a job you could love? Which takes a much longer time to think about. And I suspect one of the problems is we're starting to forget how to think slowly about things. And I feel that's something that's worth preserving, really.
We will talk about the internet again, but before that, you have a very interesting story about how you found the job you loved. You wrote an article about that, and how you left it, how you decided to left it.
The Wired job, yeah.
Could you share your story
Sure.
with us, because you had to travel a lot to do that from
Well, you know what, I mean, it was in 2008. This story is not going to make me sound very professional, I don't think. It was in 2008, and I decided, I've been working since 1988, and since 1989 as a self-employed, as a freelance journalist primarily. And I've been working on and off for the Financial Times newspaper for 12 years, I think, by then, for the weekend FT. And we had, as inevitably happens, a fallout, an argument, and I left the paper. It wasn't dramatic, it was just, I think, freelance careers end either in an argument or in them completely forgetting you, and so at least we had an argument, you know. So. But anyway, and so the year started suddenly with work. I expected to have 3 months' work, and then the work fell through. So suddenly I had 3 months with no work. And I thought, you know what, I will take a sabbatical year. I've been working 20 years. I saved a little bit of money, and I will do some traveling. And what I decided to do was, I had been a travel writer for quite a lot of that time, and so I decided that I would travel anywhere I wanted, but I would have two rules. One was I would not write about anywhere I was going to travel, and the second is I would not go on an aeroplane. Because by that time I'd really discovered the joy of slow travel. I really had discovered, especially in Europe, trains that go through Europe, you know, trains especially to Spain, to places like this, are amazing, you know, they're an amazing feeling. They're ridiculously expensive. It's much cheaper to go by the equivalent of gold, you know, to, you know, whatever, EasyJet. But actually I discovered that slow travel was something I really liked. And to be honest, that was probably the start of, you know, what I feel now about the internet. So this slowness is good. Anyway, so I went first to Spain and to Portugal, and then I went by train and bus and minibus and shared taxi and something else to Jerusalem. I went from London to Jerusalem, and this was across the whole of Europe to Istanbul, through Turkey, through Syria, through Jordan, and then into Jerusalem and the land border. Now, really sadly, of course, that's not a journey that it would be possible to take now. And I was in Aleppo and I was in Damascus, and it's heartbreaking to see the civil war in Syria and see what's happened there. But also, very sadly, that's not a journey someone from London could take easily now either, because immediately you would be suspected of going to fight in the jihad in the Middle East. You know, I mean, you would. I mean, and I'm Jewish, and I still would be suspected of some weird way of going to fight in the jihad. We are so anxious now in Europe about terrorism that anybody taking a strange land journey through Turkey into Syria would be very suspicious, very suspicious. Anyway, I ended up in Jerusalem, and I lived for about 3 months in Jerusalem. I did some studies there, and I spent some time. And then I wanted to come home, and suddenly I found I couldn't get home with my no aeroplane rule, because I thought there were boats out of Israel to Europe, but there weren't, they'd stopped. And I really explored incredibly insane ideas. Maybe I could go by car through Egypt, Libya, which way? Egypt, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, you know, and eventually get to the north of Morocco where there's a boat to Spain, if you like. I mean, these insane ideas. And then someone said, oh, why don't you try cargo ships? There are lots of cargo ships going from Israel. And so I went on Google, and I Googled Haifa, Ashkelon cargo, and then just found 60 or 70 companies, and I wrote to them all and said, have you got a ship that's leaving Israel in August to anywhere in Europe. And it was delightful. Somebody wrote back and said, yeah, we have one and you can come aboard and the cost is this. And basically I went on a container ship across the Mediterranean, which was fantastic. I mean, it was such a different experience. It was clean but cheap, if you like. The food was amazing because you ate with the crew, and the crew, they need strength. They're doing all these physical jobs all the time. And so there's lots of good food. And but there's nothing to do, there's no entertainment. There was one room called the salon, which had a tiny television which picked up whatever broadcast the boat was near, if you like, whatever country was near. There was vaguely picture on this TV, but you couldn't see the TV anyway because everyone smoked. The air was just full of this smoke. And eventually we arrived at Athens, and then I learned something quite important that when we take a boat in Europe, or I'm sure here a ferry, we're kind of luxury passengers because we're public. If you're a container ship, you basically have to wait for a parking space. And we arrived at Athens, but we didn't really arrive at Athens. We arrived about 500 meters from Athens, and we could see it there. And we waited and we waited and we waited for about a day and a half or 2 days, stuck on our boat. And all these passenger ferries came just shooting past us. And what was brilliant was on board there were about 3 or 4 other people like me, passengers who didn't have cargo. And they started going mad. I mean, we all started going a bit mad. It was like Kafka. And I kept myself to myself. I was reading my book, but one of them suddenly announced what he was doing in Israel, which was he's sure the world was about to end, and he was finding evidence for this in Israel. And then these 2 guys who were on board because they were transporting their motorbikes, the night before we were due to arrive, had decided to use up all their beer and all their cigarettes in one final party. So of course now they're going crazy because they have no cigarettes, they've got a hangover, and they can't get off the boat, and they're actually going crazy. And so we're all stuck on this boat, and we sit there for about a day and a half, and the captain eventually takes pity on these two guys and sends a boat for cigarettes and beer to bring it back to calm them down. Anyway, this is a long story, but I eventually got to Athens, and I came up through Europe, eventually got back to London. And at that point, I decided to leave journalism. I felt, I've done 20 years as a writer, I'll do something else now. And exactly when I decided that, I got an email, it's probably here, we have in London a kind of a company that advertises media jobs, and you get a weekly email from them. And I always look vaguely at them, probably actually in case friends want a job at some magazine. And it went Wired, and it showed an advert for someone to join the founding team of Wired as managing editor. And very weirdly, I don't mean this arrogantly, it perfectly described me. I read about it's little 5 lines of text, and I kept on reading it, and like, wow, actually it does. And I love Wired as a magazine. To be honest, I would like to say, I knew it was going to be founded, but I had no idea. I'd been on a boat coming across the Mediterranean with, with two mad people and beer and cigarettes. So it was looking for a managing editor, and it said send an email and your CV to this email. And I'm there. I'm almost literally just off the boat. I'm covered in sweat and whatever, and I'm just looking at my emails. And so I don't have a CV, so I just sent an email. I said, fair enough, whatever, I'll just inquire. And the next day, they ran back and said, can you come for an interview? And to be honest, I kept this email I sent them, because actually I don't believe you should send CVs when people send a CV, because there's probably something on it which gives them a bad impression of you, if you understand. You don't want to do that. When you're applying for a job, you're not applying for the job, you're applying for the interview. You want to send an email which makes them think, this guy, this sounds kind of interesting. Why don't we invite him in? You understand? And that's what I did. I sent a kind of email, which I deliberately wrote to sort of, let me go back. My CV is a disaster from the point of view of someone in human resources. For 20 years, I've done a bit of this, and then there was a gap, and then something here, and then a bit of this, a bit of the Financial Times, a bit of the Arena. When you actually look at it chronologically, it has so many gaps in it. Because also I decided to work less. That a human resources person is going to go, this guy is, not committed, something like this. So don't send your CV. Send an email which hints at these talents you have. And they will go, oh wow, you know, this guy sounds interesting, let's have a chat with him. And actually they invited me the next day. I went for an interview. The editor, who turned out to be the editor of White, he'd already been appointed, he said, meet, we have a chain of sandwich shops called Pret a Manger. I don't know if they have them here, you know, and if anyone's been to London, they're very nice sandwich shops. But there are hundreds of them. And he said, meet at Pret a Manger in blah, blah, blah street. And of course, there's 3 in this street. And so for about an hour, he stood outside one and I stood outside the other. This is my interview, you know, like it's all going horribly wrong. We're phoning each other. Where are you? I'm at Pret a Manger. No, so am I. You know, this chaos. And then we had a meeting, and then we had another interview, and then a third interview, and eventually he said, we'd like to offer you the job. And then he asked me for a CV. And so I had to sort of write one, but it was only for the boss. You know, it's like the big boss wants to see the CV, but actually the whole job came without a CV. And I was reluctant, to be honest, to take the job, because I didn't want to work in a company. I was really enjoying being autonomous. This was the kind of job I love, you know, to work for myself. But I said to them I would work for 3 years. It's the beginning of a magazine, it's an exciting time, but at the end of 3 years I would leave. And that was very nice actually, because when the end of 3 years came, I left on a good note. You know, everyone knew it. We had a very smooth handover to my successor, and now I'm a contributing editor to the magazine, and I write for the magazine. And I'm pleased I risked that. You know, they could have said, oh, you know, he didn't send a CV. You know, he wants to work for 3 years. You know, he's not a committed worker. But I was lucky enough to find people who were bright enough to see beyond that and say, actually, yeah, this guy's offering us something here, and we can work together. And you know what? I had a really good time those 3 years. I was very happy to leave at the end, but I'm very pleased with how the magazine went from 0 to a very successful magazine in that time. Yeah, so that's how I got it.
So let's talk about the internet again. Like you said, you have a very critical view of the internet. And, skeptical. And last year in my speech you said that some of the most fundamental values of the internet are not respected today in the internet. That you have to change it in some ways.
I said, sorry, some of the most fundamental values of the world.
That you have to change the internet in some ways.
Well, there's something interesting. Sorry, please, ask, go.
So
never interrupt a journalist.
Feel free to do that, no problem. And why you have to change the internet, and in what aspects? In this picture you said about 3 things, 3 topics. But what ways we have to change the internet today, and what is wrong?
Well, you know what, I think you're probably referring to a speech I made here in São Paulo about the internet. And in a way, I think there were even 7 things I felt we had to change or something. But since then, I've been thinking in a slightly more complex way about the internet actually, because I made a radio program for the BBC a few months ago. Because it's, you know, the 25th birthday of the World Wide Web, and I was interested in how the web has become what it has become now, compared with what the vision of the web was in 25 years ago. You know, so I think this will answer your question actually, because it struck me that when the early pioneers of the internet were developing the internet, and I mean kind of the people who developed TCP/IP, for example, and Tim Berners-Lee and the idea of the World Wide Web especially. You know, many of us will remember there was a sense of quite radical egalitarianism about it. This was going to be a platform. They didn't use the word platform, but this was going to be a space where everyone had equal rights to broadcast and everyone could equally be heard, if you like. And this was the opposite of, say, the corporate capitalist world that the pioneers saw around them in the 1980s and the 1990s. And that started to be the case. In fact, there was this famous thing, the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, which was, like the United States Declaration of Independence from Britain, an attempt to make the world of the internet a separate world, a separate country, in which the laws of the terrestrial countries did not apply. And so it was a very libertarian idea. And then you come to now, and we find actually the internet is not really like this. The internet is run by 4 or 5 huge corporations, which are private, which appear actually also to be beyond the law, but to their benefit, not ours, if you like. I mean, we in Britain are having a terrible problem getting Google to pay taxes. Even though Google does a huge amount of actual business in Britain, it pays, I believe, 0 tax, corporation tax, in Britain, because it pretends that work is done in Luxembourg or in Ireland, in Luxembourg, And it's not alone. Almost all the big corporations do this in Europe. So I was interested in what's happened to the internet between that original dream of all of us equal to, if you like, a corporate world. And in a way, it turned out that the internet was always going to become that because of its structure. Because of this idea of network effects, that it's the kind of network that the strongest players on the network become even stronger. It's exponential, if you like. So, I mean, this is obvious when you think about it. Facebook is not the only social network, but it is the biggest by miles and miles and miles. Because if all your friends are on Facebook, you want to be on Facebook too. It's no point in having your friends here and you being over here, if you like. So the more people are on Facebook, the more people will join Facebook. And this is the network effects. And so we've created a world in which very few people have almost all the power and the wealth, if you like, on the internet. So if the graph is going along, there's all of us here at about 0, influence, wealth, money, whatever we decide. And then suddenly, a very few people, it's like a power curve. I think it's called a Pareto curve. I'm not sure, is that right? A Pareto curve. And so we've got to, and this is the inevitable product of the structure of the internet, if you like. It's a place where there's incredibly free movement. People can leave one company and go to another one very quickly. And it's free, virtually free to get millions of customers, if you like. There's almost 0 marginal cost. So we've made this place where we're going to get this graph all the time. So when it comes to the values of the internet, what we're doing now is we're valuing something which rewards the number 1 in any sector and basically kills numbers 2 downwards in the sector. Now that's not actually what capitalism necessarily does, for example. If I'm the number 2 plumber in my town, I probably get a fair amount of work. But we've created a world where you cannot be the number 2 plumber, if you like, or the number 2 digital plumber at least, because who would go to, who wants to buy the second best app for something? You'd be crazy, you buy the best app, and hence you go to Google and, let's face it, you don't go to Bing, or, you definitely don't go to Yahoo, or whatever's down there, And in the end, Bing and Yahoo, they will disappear. I mean, they won't disappear because they're kind of important for the companies to have. But, there are lots of GPS apps, for example, which are great, but Google only bought one, Waze, that one from Israel, W-A-Z-E, and there's probably a sort of number 2 Waze, which is almost as good as Waze, but that will be dead. I mean, and we've created this world where only the number 1s survive. Now, to come back to values, this is a very interesting challenge for us as human beings. Because actually, we're unfortunately going to be in a world of work where only the number 1s survive. There's some good work being done by a guy called McAfee at MIT, and I can't remember, he writes with a colleague, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, Bryn Hofson, I think. But there's a book called The Second Machine Age, which I would really recommend. You know this book? Yeah, it's a great book, and they're really making this point clearly, that actually, pretty soon, almost all our jobs in this room, much of what we do now will be done by a machine. Including, let's face it, writing, and including teaching or something. Education is getting to a stage where, maybe I don't come here anymore. Maybe someone much more interesting is actually here as an avatar on the screen talking to this room, and why not? You know, I mean, maybe Carl Sagan or someone is here, not me. You know? And so, if I could be arrogant and say maybe I'm the number 2 to Carl Sagan, you know, then I'm dead in the water like the number 2 GPS app. You know, who'd want me when you can get Carl Sagan? So we get into a world actually where we're prioritizing the number ones all over the place, and we're not working out what we're going to do with numbers 2 right down to 70 million or 7 billion or whatever. Let's face it, the population of the world. And I think this is going to be a problem for us because we're so fetishizing the triumphs on the internet that we're forgetting that there are also casualties from this way of thinking. And we're going to have to come around again to the way of thinking that actually it's okay to be number 2 or number 20 or number 100 or whatever it is. But I'm not quite sure how number 2 down are going to make money. You know, let's face it, we all in our world of journalism are facing challenges from the digital world. And we're all wondering how to make money from our editorial work. It's proving difficult, let's face it. I'm sure here, absolutely in Britain, it's proving very difficult to make money from what we do. And probably, in my opinion, although I'm not an expert on the business of media, but it seems to me that the model of advertising income to pay for editorial expenditure is broken. And I think it's irreversibly broken. And we're clinging on to the last years or the last months or something of this model. But if you look at the most successful media brand or title in Britain, for example, it's in the newspaper world, it's probably The Guardian. I don't mean in circulation, but or you look at it in circulation, it's the Mail, the Daily Mail in Britain. These 2 newspapers have completely free websites which have more content and more work done to them than the printed papers ever did, and yet they're giving them away completely for free. So, and those 2 papers are making journalists redundant continually, if you like. You know, The Guardian only survives because it also owns a used car sales website, which makes a lot of money. And the Mail only survives because the company that owns it is very rich. But really, you know, they're both losing money, and this is our industry. So we're getting to the stage where, will there even be a Guardian or a Mail in Britain? Or here, a Folio de São Paulo or a Globo? Because maybe the number 1 will be, I don't know, the New York Times, and actually just the whole world reads the New York Times, if you like. And actually what a horrible world that would be. So this is now my complaint, I hate saying the word, my skepticism about the internet, that we're promoting number 1 takes all, the winner takes all. And we need to be careful about that model, I think.
You have an idea that we, the common people, we have to charge Google and Facebook for our data.
It's not my idea.
Yeah, it's something like that.
God, yeah.
How this could work, and do you think that content producers like publishers and journalists could charge them too, like some countries in Europe are trying to do?
Well, at the moment, the countries in Europe that are trying to do this have no hope. I mean, they're trying to solve a new problem with an old tool, which is they're trying to do it with regulation. And you know, as we see with Google, we can't even get Google to pay tax, even though it has offices and buildings in Britain. It doesn't pay tax in Britain, you know. So forget regulation. But this idea that all content could be paid for in a small way on the internet comes from a guy called Ted Nelson, who actually proposed an internet, I think in the 1960s, was it, or 1970s? You know, before the internet, before Tim Berners-Lee, he proposed this idea of a hyperlink, but it would be a 2-way hyperlink. And so you could click on something and get some content, if you like, and put it in your website or whatever it was, or publish it on. But just as the content would come to you, the fact you were using it would go back to the author. In other words, the hyperlink would also always contain the original source of the content. And a guy called Jaron Lanier, who you've probably come across in Berkeley, in California, is exploring this idea at the moment, because he points out that we've made a kind of a strange Faustian bargain with the internet, that very early on in the days of the internet, we decided we didn't want to pay for anything. And this is what I mean about adolescents, or children. We really decided, I want email, but I don't want to pay for email. I want search, but I don't want to pay for search. I want encyclopedias, which are incredible, but I don't want to pay for them. Even though, in the real world, I paid for printed encyclopedias, I paid for libraries, I paid for postal services. Somehow in the internet, we decided this was going to be free. So companies needed to find a way of making money. And what they did was they said, okay, it'll be free, but you give us all your data about yourself as people. And naively we went, sure, no problem at all. You can take what you want, And now we've discovered two things. That data is very valuable. And secondly, that perhaps they know too much about us. There's someone, when I was making this radio program, an interviewer said to me, Facebook, because of the amount of data now it has, Facebook probably knows that two people are about to have an affair before they do. Just because of their behaviour and the way they click and things like this. Now, so we've given away so much information, and Jaron Lani is now looking at, could we introduce the Ted Nelson idea into the internet, that perhaps every time any bit of content is used by someone else, a tweet, a video, a comment, a blog post, whatever it is, a micropayment goes back to that person. And similarly, anytime we view anything done by anyone else, we send a micropayment. We view a YouTube video, there's a little micropayment goes from us to the author of that video. And he's exploring this with a graduate student there in Berkeley at the moment, about how would the money flow? And he feels this could be the end of the network effects, that actually, Google will have to pay so many micropayments, that actually in the end the money will even out. There probably won't be winners and losers, but there won't be huge companies like Google or Facebook. Imagine Facebook having to pay its users every time it benefits from the user's data, which is all the time, if you like. And so he's exploring this. It's worth investigating how this research is going. Jaron Lani, and this is interesting. I don't think the internet will change in this respect, but actually, if we wanted to have two-way micropayment hyperlinks, it's a very small adjustment of the programming code of TCP/IP, and we could, maybe when we're sitting here, please God, in 25 years' time, I'm just trying to think what I would look like. Can we keep this photo, please? In 25 years' time, celebrating the 50th birthday of the internet, we'll discover actually, you remember when the internet was only one way, or something, Maybe this is how we'll solve this problem.
I would like to make one more question,
sure.
And then we will open to
okay, a pleasure.
Yeah. And in the internet, there are a lot of amateurs and a lot of disinformation going on. How we, as journalists and as professionals, could deal, how we had to deal with this, and how the reader will deal with this in the future.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I think as journalists we have one challenge and one job here. There is so much rubbish on the internet, but there's actually also so much rubbish in the real world as well. And we dealt with this before. We learned our trade, we learned our craft, we learned to understand that we hear someone telling us a story, and then we want to check it. Maybe we try and find someone independent of them and see if they tell us the same story. And this is our business, if you like, as journalists, to be skeptical about the stories we hear. And that is the challenge for us. On the internet, quite a lot of things are convincing. And the trap we fall into with the internet is, I've done this as well as everyone. I'm sure everyone in this room has done this. We find ourselves checking a fact against a different place where actually the source for that different place is the same source. This is the maddening thing of the internet. Actually, this is this graph, because it means fact A or fact A. The more it's repeated, the more it's repeated. So suddenly, at the top of Google is the fact that Mars is. It's a stupid question. The piano-playing cat is better than Shostakovich or something like this, and it's repeated and repeated and repeated, so we take this as truth. And we as journalists, we need to understand more about how to be skeptical of the internet, but also how to find, if you like, the facts numbers 2, 3, 4 to 1 million, which is how we did it before. Now, I believe those facts are not on the internet. I think the real world we're reporting on is out there in the real world. And when we founded Wired, one of the things I really encouraged us all to do was to not be in the office. Because it's so easy to do journalism from in front of a screen. I look this on Wikipedia, I check this on Google, if you like. Whereas in fact, the more interesting things are happening out there in the street. And it's a bit more difficult, and it takes a bit more time. And this is the second challenge we have. Because we're losing money as an industry, many of our colleagues have lost their jobs, and we are now doing their jobs as well. And the amount we have to write and produce has increased, and the time we have to do this has decreased. And so obviously, it's great if we quickly look on the internet and find our fact appears to be correct. And as a result, we're now betraying our second role, which is to protect the public from this. Because we're only going to survive as journalists if we can show the world that we have a function. And our function is no longer storytelling. Everyone there is storytelling. Anyone with a blog, or with a video upload, or with a Twitter stream is telling stories. We have to find that our role has changed, and we have to do something different. We have to tell better stories in a better way, and in an engaging way for readers, and promise them that we have bothered to check the facts that we're doing. And unfortunately, many of us are finding that we don't have time to do either of those things. And I would really commend, as a future of journalism, something that actually didn't appear in our world, but appeared in radio. Did you come across here a podcast from the United States called Serial? Was this popular here?
No.
Okay.
No, but
You heard this, yeah?
yeah.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Great, thank you. I mean, Serial.
Inhaled it.
Me too. Serial. It's on the web. If you go to Serial with an S podcast. It came from a radio station called This American Life, which is part of WNYC in the States. And I'll be brief. They decided to tell a single story over 12 episodes, a real life story. And they decided to reinvestigate a murder which took place in 1999, I think, is that right? Yeah.
98 or 99.
98 or 99, where a high school kid called Adnan Said, was found guilty of murdering his ex-girlfriend. And he's still in prison, and he says he's innocent. And they decided to reinvestigate this case and interview everyone they could find considering it. And they started broadcasting before they'd finished the series. So they started broadcasting, okay, now we're going to talk to this witness, and the presenter said, I really think now he's guilty, but on the other hand, it doesn't explain why, he blah, 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 and so the program each week went on in a fantastically gripping way, trying to uncover the truth about what happened in 1999 and in the court case and everything. And at the same time, they put everything up on the web, and they had the documents, the photographs, the police evidence and everything. And of course, an internet world suddenly emerged of people also trying to do research and putting up, suggestions and everything. So suddenly the whole thing became interactive. And then the whole thing became very meta. It was then covered by the mainstream newspapers and everything. In fact, the BBC bought the rights and broadcast this channel. Now, 1.5 million people every week downloaded this podcast. For a podcast, that's amazing. It's not even music. It's not even that, what's he called? The Korean guy who's this, I can't remember his name. It's not even that. It's speech. This is speech radio of a serious topic. And 1.5 million people were downloading it every week. And like you, I couldn't wait until Thursday for the next episode to come. This is the future of journalism. Now, these people spent a long time with a big team telling an interesting story very well and researching the facts and researching the facts and researching the facts, so you could be confident whatever you heard them telling you wasn't something they quickly found on Wikipedia. It was something they really had investigated. And they got into a car with a microphone and interviewed someone and reported back, if you like. I don't want to be boring, but this is old school journalism, and it was a huge commercial success, and I think that's the future for us.
I hope so.
But I would really recommend it. I mean, please, Serial. I mean, it was incredible. You can hear all 12 episodes in one weekend go if you want on the web. I think it was great, absolutely great.
So thank you very much for the
Thank
time.
you. I'm sorry I was late. I really am sorry I was late. Yeah.
Now let's see what they want to know.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Então, gente, perguntas, alguém tem alguma dúvida? Não, sem perguntas.
A gente pode tentar falar em português, se você quiser. Pode. Tentar.
Só uma dúvida quanto... well, maybe it's easier.
In English, please, yeah.
About...
Fim de experimento,
You took part in the second launch of Wired, right? Of Wired UK, right? And you were there in the first 3 years of the new Wired. Well, you talked a little bit about the future of newspapers. You give examples of The Guardian. But since this is a magazine publishing company, I'd like to listen to your comments on the future of magazines like Wired.
Okay, so I need to be careful. First of all, I am no longer, if you like, in the inner circle of Wired in the United Kingdom, so I can't really speak with authority about how the business is doing specifically about Wired. It's doing okay. I mean, I know it's doing okay. But all magazines in Britain are doing badly, if you like. And this is because of this breakdown of the relationship between advertising and editorial. And I would include even in my company, Wired is Condé Nast, and we have Vogue and Glamour, and these are successful titles, but they're doing less well than they did before, I'm sure. So what we decided to do at Wired was that the income wouldn't only come from advertising, but we needed an income, obviously. So we decided quite early on to try to expand the brand. I hate sounding like a marketing person, but it's probably the correct thing to say. And very early on we decided to run an annual conference in which a lot of the people we interviewed and a lot of the people who wrote for us would come to speak, like TED. We wanted it to be as good as TED, if you like. And we launched this conference, I can't remember how long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I think it's in its 5th year now. It was a 2-day conference. It was in London, and we decided it was going to be amazing and cost a lot of money to go to. So in other words, being positioned up here, like TED. And I can't remember what the ticket cost was, but it was something like, £1,500 for 2 days, or something, £1,500 for 2 days, which even in London is a lot of money for a conference. And we decided, the editor got very involved in this and decided to program the conference so there wouldn't be a single moment that was boring or dull, if you like. And he also spent time with the speakers, rehearsing the speakers and helping them sort their slides and really get something sharp. And we really limited them. They could only, so like in TED, they could speak, I think, for only 10 minutes or something like this. So there was a good variety of speakers. And we decided also that, I think like in TED, there wouldn't be separate streams, which usually happens in conferences. We would have one auditorium and everyone would be in this room. And then in between sessions, there would be, how can I put this, good coffee, if you like. It wouldn't be like that thing, sometimes you go to a conference and like this, there's this horrible machine or terrible biscuits. So, this would be a luxury event, if you like. And it was a triumph. And then we did something clever. I think on the last day we announced that you could book for the next year one at a discount if you booked within, I don't know, 2 days or something like that. And actually the next year one almost immediately sold out at £1,500. I mean, it was like, and we suddenly realized actually that's probably the income of the magazine. Stuff like that. So we've expanded in conferences, and now we have this annual one, and we have then lots of smaller ones, like to do with health, to do with finance, etc., etc. And we also have, at each of them, we have a kind of side arena for innovation. We have the thing called the startup stage. And we try to get investors to come and basically startups to pitch to investors in a kind of public way. And one startup will get an investment, a sum of money at the end of this conference. So, there was this bit of drama going on also at the conference, and it shows we're encouraging investment. But to be cheap about it, it's good money doing these conferences. It's better money than putting adverts in magazines. Now, it's not going to save the magazine, but it's certainly going to be a big aspect of the magazine's income. So in other words, we're having to become a multiple thing rather than when I started in magazines, all you needed to do was get an advertiser and job done. I think the conferences will help. But you know what? What's sad for me is that the biggest expense of a magazine, as we know, apart from staff, is printing and distribution. And I love paper magazines. And I'm really sad to say that actually the paper magazine might be dying soon. And we might all be digital, or web, or iPad, or tablet soon. And when we launched, I was involved in the launch of the iPad edition of Wired. This was the first edition within the company, Condé Nast, which went onto the iPad, and we were the pioneers, and I was involved in a hellish process to try to get it to work. And we had this dream that maybe actually most of our readers would buy it on the iPad, and that would be just printing money, if you like, because the great thing, as we know about the digital world, is that there is zero marginal cost, that if you can get your initial production costs down, we imagine what would happen is that 99,000 people would buy it on the iPad, and that would be just free money. And then maybe 10,000 people would buy the magazine. And actually I was imagining that maybe they might buy a really luxury edition of the magazine for maybe £20 or something. And maybe it came in a box or something. And this is actually maybe a vision of the future. Maybe the print version will be something incredibly luxurious. Maybe it will include a ticket to the conference or something, and the digital version becomes the norm. Now, as it is, with Wired, that hasn't turned out to be the case. Everyone loves the printed version of the magazine and wants to have the printed version. And good on them. I think that's because it looks nice, it feels nice, and I think most importantly, you can read it in the bath. In cold countries like Britain, we like to read magazines in the bath. It's not like here, quickly in the shower and to the beach or whatever. But seriously, you could drop it in water and it doesn't break. You could take it to the beach. You can take a paper magazine to the beach, and it's not like worrying about, where's my iPad, if you like. You can throw this thing at someone, and it won't break. And so paper is a good medium. It's a better medium than the tablet. And this is why people still want it. But unfortunately for us, it costs a lot of money to print these paper things and to distribute them. So I'm not sure. I think the future will have to be luxurious for magazines. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I've gone miles away from that.
I'd like to continue with this question. I'm very interested. One question: did you pay the speakers at the conference, at the Wired conference, the very successful one, and how much? Or a lot, or little, or none? And secondly, one thing that seems very interesting to me is how we've started charging for face-to-face encounters, and it's sort of like the music industry a lot. It seems like maybe the magazine industry is going through what the music industry went through, and I'd like you just to talk about that. Is that it seems like we're putting a lot of value. We can charge £1,500 for a face-to-face encounter, but nothing for digital. And is that where you see things going? It seems like your life with the School of Life is going in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely good. Let me not answer your first question first. I actually don't know the answer, so I'm not even being English and discreet about this. I literally don't know. My guess is we probably paid some of them if they asked. Who knows? I suspect. I suspect some of them spoke for free and some of them we paid, but to be honest, I don't know. Maybe I might be wrong. We maybe had a rule we didn't pay anyone. To be honest, I set up the conference in about my third year time, and then I left, and so by the time it was actually properly functioning, I'd left the company. So I really don't know.
Fair enough.
I know some of the speakers were good enough that we should have paid a lot of money, and if we had them for free, that was amazing, you know. But I suspect some we paid and some we didn't. I don't know. Now, the second thing is really interesting, because actually you're right. The future is face-to-face, if you like, because what we've created with the digital world is a world in which we can replicate things incredibly cheaply and easily, and not only us, but other people. So, for example, I'm the editor of a thing called The Wired World, which is like the Economist year ahead. It predicts the next year. And we've just published, and I would recommend it to you, it's available for download, The Wired World in 2015. Now, this is published it's published in print, and it's published digitally on the iPad, and I think on the Kindle Fire, and as a PDF on Zinio. Is this something you guys use here? Zinio? Yeah, okay, so it's on Zinio as a PDF. Now, I was going to say the day, but probably the hour it appears on Zinio, hundreds of free downloads appear everywhere else on the internet, of The Wired World in 2015. From mirror sites, which they're not very interested in giving you a free copy of this magazine. They want you to come to the site so you can see the advertising on that site. And it's quite shameful. You type in The Wired World in 2015, and suddenly everywhere you find is a free copy of your magazine, which you've worked hard to produce and you're trying to sell. So actually that battle is lost. We can't go back to that. In the early days, we tried to do all this sort of stuff of DRM, and we tried to chase those websites, but they're in Russia. I mean, what? Russia is currently invading Ukraine. What, we're going to go and talk to Putin about this? I'm sorry, there's a PDF of my magazine in your country. That's not going to happen. So we need to assume that battle is lost. That as soon as we publish digitally, there will be infinity free copies of our product available for download. And let's face it, this is exactly what music has faced, film has faced, come on, can anyone put their hand up in here who hasn't even had a quick look at Pirate Bay, for example, the solution to this may be that actually, it might be something to do with pricing. So let me just divert for a moment. Let me put my hand on my heart. I have, once or twice, downloaded a movie from Pirate Bay. But the last time I did that and actually thought about what I was doing was an interesting moment. I was in Morocco on holiday, and I wanted to watch a movie about, there's a famous movie about Bradley Manning and Julian Assange, a documentary. I can't remember what it's called. They Sell Secrets, I think it's called. Yeah, is that what's called? Really good. Someone was recommending it to me.
Netflix.
I would really recommend it. It's an amazing film. And my two friends who I was in Morocco with were going out for the evening, and I just wanted to stay in, and have some food. And I actually fancied watching this movie. So I went to iTunes, and it was shockingly expensive. It was something like, you couldn't rent it, you could only buy it for, I think, £15.99. Now, I know that's not a lot of money, especially for somebody who's in a luxury villa in Morocco or whatever, but that's more than I spent to go to a cinema in London for the experience of the cinema. I said, oh, come on, I don't want to keep this film, I don't want to spend £15.99. So I went to Pirate Bay and I got it for free, for €0. Now, if iTunes at that point had given me a button saying, pay what you like, then actually, I think I'd have probably paid about £5.99 for that, and I would have paid it, and that would have gone to the distributor of the film. And I suspect something like that is the future, because they limited my options essentially between pay $15.99 or steal it, or actually do nothing. I agree. I could not do anything. I decided to steal it. I decided to pay $0. If they'd said $15.99 or steal it or pay a contribution, then they would have had £5.99 more than they do now, if you see what I mean. I wonder if the future for us is similar. I wonder if The Wired World could be available for, whatever it is, £5.99, or make a contribution. Because I suspect quite a lot of people would think, yeah, actually it's worth it, I'll give you £2, I'll give you $3 or something. And that's this cent, but that's fine, it's a cent more than $0, And let's face it, if we think of this world we talked about earlier, the world of network effect, 1 million cents is actually quite a lot of money. You know, and there's zero marginal effect. If we can get 1 million people to download our magazine and give us 1 cent, then you know what? We're going on holiday. I mean, you know, that's an answer. It's better than 1 million people are downloading it and paying zero. And so there's a very interesting book, I think, called The Curve. And if you like, afterwards, I'll look this up and send you an email and we can distribute it, by an English guy who says actually the future of income is going to be like this. It's again this curve that we talked about earlier. He said, imagine your product is digital. Most people will be down here paying almost nothing or stealing your product. 90% of the people. And he said, you shouldn't worry about them actually. They are free marketers for your product. They are the people who are saying, wow, did you read that cool thing in blah? You know, and they go, oh, no, I should look at that. You know, did you see that film, They Steal Secrets? Did you read The Wired World? You know, this amazing thing they're saying. You know, you should look at that. They're the people who are marketing us. That's fine. Up here, the curve starts to increase in terms of income. There are fewer people, but they're paying a bit more for the product. And he says, we need to work out what will these people pay a bit more for. So maybe, to begin with, they might pay a bit more for the print version of the magazine, because they like print, they're like me. So maybe, you know, just like, maybe they might pay about as much as they pay for a book now, for the print version, if the print version was a bit more luxurious. So at Wired, for example, because it's Condé Nast, we absolutely stuck to our commitment to print on very good paper, with very high quality printing and repro, and a really nice cover. And so we delivered what we felt was an artifact that people would spend money on. So this is the curve starting to come up here. You know, here's not the free, but the £3.99 or £4.99. And he says, going up, here's the people coming to your conference. They're now £1,500, if you like, per head. And he says, right at the top of this curve is someone who will pay you £1 million for something you could offer. And in the book he says, you know, this is maybe like the Sultan of Brunei wants you to come as the editor of this magazine to have dinner with him and his daughter, because the daughter is applying to university and he feels that a conversation with a magazine editor will help her with her application, and he will pay £1 million for this one dinner. And in a way, the total income is 1 million plus a number of £1,500 plus a greater number of 5.99s, and then all these frees and the 1 cent. Your total income is still high, but the distribution of it has changed. It's along the curve now. And then what we need to do is work out how can we, first of all, not worry about the people stealing, and secondly, understand the beginning of the curve. Who are these people, and what will they pay a bit more for, a bit more for, a bit more for, until we get to the one person who will pay us £1 million. And in the book he says all of us, somewhere out there, have a customer who will pay us £1 million for something we produce. And I wonder if that's the future of magazines. The curve, I think it's called The Curve. But I'll check and I'll send an email. Thank you.
Bem, gente, agora a gente tem que acabar, deu horário. Obrigado aí por a presença de todos. Thank you very much.
So thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. Sorry, I was late. Yeah, that's Que prazer! So much you know what? Because I was it's my aim. All of this information. So how about we make that top in? The catch is lovely. One more year. Okay, well, one more year.
Quero ficar vivo. Quando você vai, você tem que filmar pra gente 20 mil, a gente bateu 15, foi 12.
Quando os trabalhadores vão para o trabalho. O que vão fazer? Vai ter uma situação ou a gente não tem emprego, a gente não tem trabalho de nada. Ou toda a população tem metade do trabalho que tem hoje, os computadores, por exemplo. Isso é uma
Passa o pai.
social. Isso é mas também para a gente um desafio de ser curtir. Porque é hoje vou fazer a primeira no mês de fevereiro. Vai ser qual é a palavra? Vai ser broadcast. Na começo do nosso, no mesmo tempo, as primeiras
bloqueio 1 milhão de vezes, ele vai participar.
mas por cento.
Eu já mandei mais outras vezes não foi dizendo eles
eu posso fazer uma coisa. Tem bem que ser, mas também tem dó. Depois tem